title of this homily is Flowers for Ruth. These past few days have been especially hard. For many of us, like me, we have just been hanging on by the skin of our teeth, trying somehow to last until November 3rd. Part of what held us together and gave us hope was the persistent and prophetic tenacity of Ruth Bader Ginsburg as she fought to the last breath to remain alive until after the election. But the cancer finally won the battle that she had been courageously fighting for so long. She died on Friday, September 18th, the last day of the Jewish New Year, a day before the celebration of Rosh Hashanah. For those who die on the day before the New Year, they are considered to be very righteous because they were needed until the very end of the year. After her expected death, thousands and thousands of people paid their respects to her by laying bouquets of flowers at the steps of the Supreme Court, as this photo illustrates. And well, they should have. She was a remarkable woman. Ginsburg was born into a Jewish family and considers herself Jewish at her roots. Practicing justice is one of the basic tenets of Judaism, and this fueled her to fight hard, especially at the beginning of her new law practice, for the full rights of women. She was born in 1933, and her life's work was shaped by the Holocaust. She was named after the biblical Ruth, the grandmother of the Jewish King David, through whom redemption was to come to the Hebrew people. Some of her more famous rulings were equal pay for women, preserving the health care law, protecting women's reproductive rights, advancing the rights of racial minorities, the poor, and the disenfranchised. She even won the ruling against Virginia Military Institute, forcing them to admit women. But in her own words, she said, "I ask no favor for my sex. All I asked of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks." This has been the main rallying point for the BLM protests after the death of George Floyd, and has brought so many together in the strands of the regressive movement. It has been very hard for me to get up after I heard of her death. I just wanted to go to bed and pull the covers over my head until it was all over. Yet I believe that the reading of the Exodus story today shows us a way out. This reading actually is just a quick snapshot in the middle of the Exodus story, so I will fill it in a little bit. Abraham and Sarah were considered to be the mother and father of the Hebrew people. They were called by God from Ur in southern Iraq to walk in caravan to the promised land of Canaan, which we now call Israel or Palestine. And they were also promised that their children and their children's children would be so many that they would be greater than the stars in the sky. Yet there came a famine in the land, even during the time of Abraham and Sarah, where they had to go to Egypt for food. And then after their return to Canaan, their descendants had to do the same thing until this time they were held by Egypt as slaves, where many of them died, way outside of the promised future that they had been foretold. And yet, a new leader rose. You all know his name, Moses. Maybe you've even watched the fantastic Exodus by Cecil B. DeMille. It's quite a classic. And so finally they left under the leadership of Moses, and according to the Exodus account, the Red Sea parted, they went through, and then it filled in again as Pharaoh and his chariots came after them. And yet very soon they started complaining. The food was scarce, they were tired, they were hungry, they had to walk too far every day, there were dangerous serpents and sand. And they wanted, some of them, just to go back to the way it was. At least in Egypt they had food and security, and they were able to live with their families. So they were ready to give up. But finally, on one day, Moses, replying to their constant complaints about lack of water, was told by God to go strike a rock. And he did so more than once, which caused him trouble later, but water flowed out to give the people all they needed. But the journey was on the next day as well, and they kept walking and walking and walking, and there seemed to never be any end. The first slaves came to this country in 1619, many, many years before the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. And yet we see their hope kept alive in the Negro spiritual, Go Down Moses. As in many other slave songs, plans to escape are encoded in the biblical story of the flight from Egypt. The lyrics refer to Harriet Tubman, a runaway slave, who later helped hundreds of fellow slaves escape from slavery. Her code name was Moses. Let us listen now with our hearts wide open to the song now, Go Down Moses.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Thus saith the Lord, bold Moses said, let my people go. If not, I'll smite your firstborn dead. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell Pharaoh, let my people go. No more shall they in bondage toil. Let my people go. Let them come out with Egypt's spoil. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Oh, tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Oh, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Ooh, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Oh, tell Pharaoh, let my people to let my people go.
Finally, after 40 years, the Bible says, they get to the promised land. Most of the people that left Egypt had already died, and it was their children and maybe even their children's children that had been handed down the promise. And Moses, the leader, could actually see the promised land from across the River Jordan. And yet, he died before he was able to get across, and he was buried some anonymous place in the desert. And it was Joshua who took the next step. And we hear that just as we heard the song Go Down Moses. We hear that as enshrined in a gospel Negro spiritual. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho.
Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came a-tumbling down. You may talk about the man of Gideon, you may talk about the man of Saul, but there's none like good old Joshua at the battle of Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came a-tumbling down. Up to the walls of Jericho, they marched with spears in hand. Go blow those ram horns, Joshua cried, 'cause the battle is in my hand. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came a-tumbling down. Then the ram sheep's horns began to blow, the trumpets began to sound. Joshua commanded the children to shout, and the walls came a-tumbling down. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came a-tumbling down.
So to conclude, I'm using the same picture that I started off with, the Supreme Court in the background. It is unclear what time of day it is. Shadows are shown on the lower part of the building. It is up to us now, in this moment, each and together, to imagine whether it is dusk, the darkness growing deeper, or the breath of a new dawn, ready to burst forth with brilliant light, leading us all the way home. I'm ending with the very known gospel song, We Shall Overcome, written in 1900 by one of the founders of gospel music. Made famous by Pete Seeger, it became the theme song of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. The origin of the song is most commonly attributed to being lyrically descended from I'll Overcome Someday, a hymn by Charles Albert Tindley that was first published in 1900. He was born in 1833 in Maryland, a slave state. His mother was white and his father was black and thus a slave. So when his mother died, since he was half white, the white family decided to keep him sort of in a servant role rather than officially as a slave. He was very well educated, self-educated, and actually ultimately became a Methodist minister. And this is the song that he wrote that was adapted by Pete Seeger. So as we listen in our hearts to this age-tested song of freedom, let us ponder the photo of the flowers laid out in honor of the life and work of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and truly ask ourselves if it is the darkness creeping up or a new light dawning, through all of us, hand in hand, steadfastly walking towards freedom for as long as it takes.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Deep in my heart, oh, deep in my heart, I do believe, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome someday. We shall live in peace. 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 Someday, someday. Oh, live in my heart. I do believe we shall overcome someday. And the most important verse is the one they wrote down in Montgomery, Alabama. They said, "We are not afraid." And the young people taught everybody else a lesson. All the older people that had learned how to compromise and learned how to take it easy and be polite and get along and leave things as they were. The young people taught us all a lesson. We are